Hello and welcome. My name is Leslie Strose. For those of you who don't know me, I am an artist and an illustrator. I live in England, but I was in the US. I'm American for many years and was a former art professor there. You may know me from my tiny paintings. I have had a lot of recent new followers on both Facebook and TikTok of people who are interested, and I get so many questions, the same questions that I thought it would be a good idea to do a live stream today to tell you about all of my supplies so that just to clear up any questions and so you know where to buy them if you're interested. So the first question that I get the most of is, where do I get the tiny palette? So this tiny palette is made by a company called Go Draw. They are handmade in Russia by an artist named Julia, and they are really lovely. They're well made. They're made out of wood. They have magnets on the side so you can open it up and they magnetize. They also have magnets in the corner to hold your paint in place when you're not painting. The magnets are excellent quality. It doesn't go anywhere. This is a mixing well. I have a lot of questions from people who ask what the white is. This white is a mixing well, and these are little wells for you to put your paint in. And it's made out of some type of an epoxy resin. And I can tell you that it's a pleasure to mix in this. The thing that I really like about this palette is that the sides are beveled a little bit. So when I'm doing a mix, I can show you. If I'm mixing some colors, I haven't pre-wet anything, so it's going to take a little bit longer. But if I'm pre-mixing my colors in here, they don't get on the side. It stays in the center and very clean, and it's also very, very easy to clean. I get another question. I'll come back to the palette in a second, but I get it just to hop forward a little bit. I get a lot of questions. Sometimes people think that I'm cleaning my brush on my clothes. I'm not. I wear these wristbands and then I can just clean my brush as I'm painting. So I hold the tiny painting in one hand and I use an Aqua brush, and I can, when I want to clean my colors or clean my brush, I can just wipe it on the wristband. I can also use my brush to pick up any unwanted paint, and I can deposit that on there as well, and that makes the well clean for the next mix. That does waste a bit more color. I don't usually do that unless I'm going to mix a green and I've had a lot of other colors in it, or if I want to mix a blue and it's got yellow in it and I don't want it to be green. Sometimes I'll do that, but for the most part, I just make a color out of whatever colors are in the well at that time. So this one is by Wilson's. It's very long and thick and heavy. It needs a wash. I do wash them. You can turn them inside out and use them both ways. So this one's, I've got a little more wear out of it, but it's due for a wash. But I also have these generic athletic wristbands that I got from Amazon, and these work really well also. And they're a little bit shorter, which is especially nice for winter painting. So back to the palette. This one is made by Go Draw. There are a lot of copycat palettes on the market. I do know that Julia from Go Draw invented these. She made them. It's her design. So I feel very loyal to her for that. But she is in Russia, and I think sometimes shipping can be a little bit tricky internationally since February. But if you go to her Instagram, it's Go Draw, and I will put the link in the description below. You can find a way to purchase these. There are a lot of people selling palettes that look like this on Etsy and on Amazon, and I would strongly caution against this particular design because it's not as well made. It's not that inexpensive either, and it's a little bit larger. You can see if I compare the two together. and it's a little bit thinner, and some people might like that, but where I really find that this design fails to deliver is the mixing wells are very shallow. So even though these mixing wells are tiny, they're quite deep. They're almost as deep, you know, they go close to the bottom, and you can fit a lot of paint in these tiny wells. And these, not as much. And sometimes the paint has a tendency to cake when it turns into a paint cake. Sometimes they fall out and I have to reattach them. But the thing that I really don't like about this is the mixing well. This one's only been used once, and you can see, I'm trying to get a little bit closer to see if you can see. It gets very stained. And this one is clean. This is as clean as I can get it. But when you're in the middle of painting, especially if you're using like blues or reds or any kind of a staining pigment, it will just color your mixing well, and that makes it very difficult to see the colors you're mixing. And since you only have one small mixing well, that can be a bit of a problem. Also, if you notice, it doesn't have that bevel on the side, which I find not as pleasant of an experience to work with. So this one has my vote. If you, for some reason, have difficulties getting this palette, there is a similar one on the market. It's made by a company called Natsume, Handmade on Etsy. And you can see she's gone to a lot of trouble to make it very similar to the Go Draw. And she has, you know, the more rounded edges. It's thicker like the Go Draw, but it is still a little bit bigger, but not too bad. And the one thing that she has done on this is she has, again, the epoxy resin with the beveled edge. And so although I have not filled and used this one, I anticipate that it's going to be more similar to the Go Draw palette. But the jury's out. I haven't used it yet. So you can stay tuned, and I will be making videos about that and posting them here on YouTube and also on my TikTok. Also, she does have the epoxy resin in the wells. You can see them here, but they don't bevel up on the edge. And these are filled with paint, so you can't see it, but these have the epoxy resin in the little paint wells in the same way that this one does in the mixing well. So this is the original. This is the one I recommend. This is the one I love. There are lots on Amazon and AliExpress and other places that are more similar to these. I don't recommend them, not least because they're a copycat of the original. But this one is lovely. If I hold this one and try to use it, it just doesn't have the same charm and delight of use as this one does. All right, so the sketchbook, people ask me sometimes that's another question I get asked quite a bit, is where do I get the sketchbook? The sketchbook also came from Go Draw. They came together. I bought them a little over a year ago, and they're created by a company called Inkberry, which is another small artisan that works nearby to where Go Draw works. And the paper is exquisite. It's a 50% cotton mix, so you can lift colors really nicely, and it's beautiful. It's an absolute joy to work with this paper. I've really enjoyed it, and I can get really fine details by using it. So I love this sketchbook. I'm getting close to the end, so hopefully I'll be able to get more from Go Draw. Again, Natsume Handmade makes similar tiny little sketchbooks. I have not used them yet. Again, stay tuned. I will be using them soon. I tend to be like faithful to one sketchbook until I'm finished with it, and then I'll move on to the next. But the paper comes in either hard press or cold press. So this is a hard press, which is, or hot press, sorry. I'm terrible at live and having to speak to the world but this is a hot press, so it's a much smoother quality. And she also makes cold press, which has more of a texture. And I believe that this paper looks amazing. The sketchbooks are adorable. They're extremely well made. They come in all different sizes, and they have, if you like to see different covers and pick those out, you can get those as well. And again, those are also made by Natsume Handmade on Etsy, and I will share the link in my bio. for that, or not in my bio. I'll share the link in the description here after this has gone to the replay mode. I have a question. I love your channel. I wanted to ask what kind of paper you would recommend to beginners. I don't really know anything about that. I have a lot of, I have a whole playlist of watercolor tips for beginners in the shorts that you can go to my channel. You can look at watercolor tips and you can find an answer to that question and to probably any other question you would have. I'm planning to make longer content to answer some of these questions that people have. But the short answer to that is I would recommend buying the most expensive paper that you can afford, because paper really makes a difference in watercolor. And I would also further recommend that you get paper that is cotton, because if you get a paper that's a cellulose or a wood pulp blend, it's not as easy to work with. You're going to find that it's more of a struggle. And yeah, it's just, I would recommend cotton paper 100%. So I don't have a particular brand. I do have some new sketchbooks by Etcher that I will be starting to use very soon, and some other paper by them, and their paper is lovely, and that also is 100% cotton. So I think I've answered the question about the palettes. No matter where you buy the palette from, shipping usually takes a little while if you're going to get a nicer one. I think I waited 6 weeks for this combination. So another thing that I did for years before I had that was I just had a little tin. It's a teeny tiny one. You can get any kind of tin. I have a whole collection of tins that I keep. And then I've just taken some empty watercolor pans and filled them with paint and put them in here. You can, spray paint the top with like a kind of an epoxy spray paint if you want, or if you want to have a palette. There are all sorts of things you can do to make this into a mixing well. But again, this is something that you could easily, if you wanted to paint tiny and you didn't have a palette, but you had a small sketchbook, maybe you made one or you bought one, you can get that same effect by doing this. There are a lot of creative ways. I should make a video about that, of ways that you can make little tiny palettes that aren't necessarily like this, but that will work very well if you want to have a small platform and you want to travel with it. I picked this one up on eBay a little while ago. It's I don't even know who it's made by. It was just kind of a vintage little tin. I liked it. These pans are old, and I think they're student grade and probably not the greatest. So I have plans to maybe remove this part and put some little wells in there, and then that would be an adorable little palette. So if you don't have a lot of money, there are ways that you can definitely make your own tiny sketchbook if you like the idea of painting small. All right, so I think that answers the tiny palette and the sketchbook question. And the other question that I get quite a bit is, what paint do I use, or how do you fill it? Because these do come empty. When you get them, they don't come filled with paint. They come similar to this, and you have to fill them on your own. Again, I have videos showing how I fill them. The paints that I have in this particular palette are by Daniel Smith, and I just have this basic essentials set. I had it previously, and so I thought, well, this would be a good one because it gives me, 2 of each of the primary colors, and then I needed 2 more. So I put 2 earth colors. I have a transparent yellow oxide and a transparent red oxide, also made by Daniel Smith. And so all of the paintings in my tiny paintings in this particular sketchbook are these Daniel Smith that are in this palette. That said, this is my first real experience with Daniel Smith. I've enjoyed the paints very much. I know they're expensive to a lot of people, especially if you don't live in the US. The paints that I use most often are Winsor & Newton professional paints. If you're a beginner, you can use the Cotman paints. Those are also really nice and much more affordable, and I used them for many years before I started using the professional paints. The difference is that the professional paints are more pigmented. There's more pigment and less binders, so the colors tend to be a little more bold and vibrant, and you don't need to layer as much necessarily. So when I finish this sketchbook and finish the paints in here. I do have to fill this up regularly. I will be trying out my Winsor Newtons in here and seeing if I like those. And these are the colors that I plan to use in the wells. So at the top, I'll use the cadmium free colors, the cad yellow pale, cad yellow deep, the hues, or the cadmium freeze, because these aren't toxic. And because I do use a wristband to clean my brush, and paint and water can get against my skin, I don't want to use cadmiums in my tiny palette. I love cadmium paints, but I don't want to use them in a plein air situation. Also because they're not as great for the environment. So these are the colors that I'll be replacing it with. And then a permanent alizarin crimson, cadmium free red, and then French ultramarine and Winsor blue, which is a phthalo blue. And then for my two earth tones at the bottom, I'll use burnt sienna and I think yellow ochre, although I may use raw umber or raw sienna. I'm going to play around a little bit with that, and I will let you know. I'll keep you posted as I go. So that question is asked a lot about what paints I use. Another question that I get, which is a little bit off the cuff, but people ask about these clips that I use. Where did I get them? And these clips are from a grocery store in the US. My mother had them and I liked them, and it really was a fluke that I started using them. So the palette came with a little binder clip, which I think in the UK they're called bulldog clips, just like this, and you can attach it here. But the clearance isn't very big. You can only fit a few pages in there, and I don't like the way that it does hold it very tightly if you're in a very windy position, but I don't like that it might dent the paper. And so I haven't really ever used that, but the reason isn't because of that. The reason is because the first time when I went to do my very first painting in this sketchbook, and I got to the destination, it was really terrible weather, rain was coming, I was about 30 minutes away from my house, and I didn't have a clip, but I had this in the car. And so I just thought, well, I'll use that, and it worked out well. And I found that I really like using these because they're nice, they're not going to dent the paper. I can use different colors, they're a little bit of fun. And yeah, these are what I use. They're just grocery bag clips or clothespins. I'm not sure exactly what they're called, but usually when I visit the US, I'll try to pick some up. And I'm not sure if they're available in the UK or in Europe or not. I haven't really investigated that. Another question I get is, what's my process? Do I sketch first? Because in my tiny painting videos, I usually skip straight to the pencil or to the ink sketch. And the reason for that is I find the ink sketch a little bit cumbersome to do. Oftentimes I'm trying to balance holding my viewfinder with the tiny sketchbook, and I have to be a little bit more focused on the drawing. But also I found when I have included a bit of the sketching, people just aren't as interested. So it's really just popular demand. People like to see the palette, they like to see the painting. They don't care so much about the drawing. So I usually just start with a very quick pencil sketch that just puts the main forms where I want them to be. And then I do an ink drawing. So the next question is, what pens do I use? And this is the pen that I've used in all of these paintings for my tiny painting. It's a Prismacolor Premier. It's a brown color, and I use the 005, which has a very tiny nib. So you can see it's very small, and I like that. If I do have a 01 if I'm going to work at home, but I find the 005 is enough, and I like to use the brown pen because I feel that in nature it blends really nicely with the watercolor. I do use the Prismacolor Premier, the 005 and the 01 in the black color for my regular ink and wash drawings. I use these a lot as well. But for this sketchbook, for the Tiny Painting Adventure series, I use just this Prismacolor Premier. It doesn't bleed. It's a waterproof ink and it is lovely. Other brands that I would recommend, because these again are going to be difficult and probably incredibly expensive in Europe to buy. I believe Prismacolor is Canadian. I could be wrong about that, but the other brands that I recommend are Staedtler and Faber-Castell and Unipin, and those are available worldwide as well. But those are also nice pens and they don't bleed. I also, I just received some Pentel fine liners, and those also are really, they worked really nicely. The double O fives on those, on the Pentel fine liners, I think they're called point liners. I found they weren't quite as thin as this, and I like to have a very thin line. That's just my style. If you like to use larger nibs, that, I mean, you can buy any size you want. That's just the size that I use. The other question that I get, or the next question that I get a lot, is what are these? What brush do I use? And I use the Pentel Aqua brushes, and I love these brushes so much. I have videos explaining how to use them. I showed a little bit at the beginning where I mixed a color, and if I want to clean it, I just have my wristband on my wrist, and you can squeeze it and some drops will come out, and it sort of self-cleans the bristles. This is stained. They do get stained, especially if you use staining colors, but it's not dirty. You know, there's no paint on this. So these are the brushes that I use the most. These are the ones that I like the most. There are many different aqua brushes on the market. I would encourage you to explore and experiment with different ones. I mostly use 2 sizes. I do a lot of my painting with the larger one, and then if I need a really small one, I go to the medium. And they do have a fine one. I don't have it handy right now, but I have videos about that. I will sometimes use this one, which is a Derwent #1. I find this one's difficult to mix with, but if I want just a super tiny little fine line, this one's guaranteed to do that for me. That said, Pentel also has a very small point, and that one works the same way. I guess force of habit, this has been in my kit for a while, and when I'm looking at it, I can tell this is the narrower one because, you know, it's a different brush. So the next question is, what is the square thingy? The square thingy is a viewfinder, and this one I have videos about how you can make your own, and about this one and different kinds of viewfinders. This one is actually called a view catcher, and they're available on Amazon as far as I know. I think I bought this on Amazon. I think you can buy them at some art stores as well. You can also buy them at their website, which is listed on it, which says viewcatcher.com. There are a lot of reasons why I love this. I love because I'm painting square. I can just open it straight up. It's a square. If I'm painting different sizes, they give you little helpful hints. So if I'm painting 11 by 14, I can move it to that marker, and then I know this is going to be an equivalent size. It's got other sizes on the back. It also has these 2 little holes that I can look through if I want to match values. So this is a middle gray value, and when you're painting with color, you want to have a variety of value as well. So this is the one that I love. I recommend it highly. It's not super cheap, but it'll last you forever. So, okay. I also get asked about what is the blue stuff in my paintings. Some of my paintings I'm using masking fluid, and the blue stuff comes from, let me pull it out of here. It comes from this Molotow art masking liquid pump marker. And this is basically, it's just masking fluid. So you shake it up just to get things flowing, and it's a little tight to open, but you can see it's got a nib on it. The nib is not the most narrow. So, you know, I only use it just if I want to preserve a couple areas. and you give it a few pumps. One tip about this is to put it on thick. If you put it on too thin, sometimes it will, when you're trying to erase it, it will come up with your paper, and that is never a nice thing. So that's the blue stuff, and I use it and I love it. And let me try to find a painting where I've used some of it. I used it on this painting to preserve some of the white colors here and here and here. It just makes it easy if you want to do a flat wash over it. It just makes things a little quicker. Yeah, so it's not necessary, but it's a nice thing to have. I also, to remove it, will use this Pentel click eraser. It's a click eraser 2, and you know, it can come out as much as you want or as little as you want. And so to remove the masking fluid, I will either use that, or I will use the little eraser on my mechanical pencils. So this eraser on the back, that will erase the masking fluid if it's a tiny area. This is a bit harder, so that works well also. So I use one of those. And so a lot of times, you know, you'll see me click this and use it to erase the masking fluid. So that's what that is. It's a Pentel click eraser. The next question I get asked a lot is, I think actually this is the last question, is where do I get the pencil case? So this is the pencil case. I'm going to try to fit it all into view. And everything that I need for a painting adventure fits in here. I have a little video tour of this on Instagram and my highlights on TikTok. I think I probably have one on YouTube Shorts as well. But I like it because everything folds up. I can put this on my lap, or I can take out, if I'm going to be standing, I can take out what I need and just leave it there. But everything has a place. And my sketchbook goes here. My palette goes here. And I have that and that. And that's it. It's all contained in one. And I keep my view catcher in here. Here I have some business cards that I keep. It, you know, sometimes you run into people and they want to see, you know, they want to get in touch with you. And I also keep a few scrap pieces of paper which come in handy. I usually have one of these. Well, I've closed it now. But I usually have one of these that if it's open to this, I'll usually stick it there. If there's a color I'm not 100% sure about and I don't want to commit to putting it down, I'll usually just use this as a little scrap paper for that. So it's always nice to have some of these. And also, if you're on the road and you want to just do a little tiny sketch not in the sketchbook, these I usually have, you know, an assortment of different sizes that I keep in here with business cards. So the pencil case, one's called Designed for Arrangement. I think they have different names in different countries, or depending on who's selling it, but they're made by a company called, I don't know how to pronounce it, but Lihit Lab, Lihit. Again, everything that I mentioned in here, I'm going to link in the description after this video is on the replay. But I got mine on Amazon. It was not expensive. It's just, if you look up Lihit Lab pencil case, you will likely find these. And I believe this is called a double. So because it has, you know, these two tiers. They have, or maybe it's not a double, maybe it's a single. But look through the descriptions because they have another one that's much wider that has another tier like this. That was more than I needed or wanted. So this is the one that I got. If you look at the descriptions, you'll see if it's this one. And I love it. It's small. It can fit in a backpack. It can fit in a purse. I can travel with it. It has everything I could possibly need, even if I don't want to paint tiny. If I want to paint larger, let me show you how that looks. I can have my larger palette, right? And I can fit this in here as well. So I can fit, sorry, I usually don't have this in at the same time. So this will work like this. If I want to, I could squeeze that in there like that. and figure out a way to put the clip in there. So again, if I'm traveling, sometimes I can just throw that in there. It'll make it a bit fatter, but it will close. I'm not going to do it because I don't usually do it that way. Or if you want to carry some of the stuff separately, it will close flush if I just take out the clip and the wristband, and you know, I can attach those elsewhere. Right, so it's very portable. I love this kit. I have been painting plein for years, and this is the way that I've streamlined things to make it so if I'm going to travel, I know I'm going to have everything that I could possibly need in this pencil case. So thank you for joining me. I hope that answers your questions. If you have more, please ask them in the description below. I will be making probably some shorter videos about this again, and maybe even a longer one that's a little less stuttery and and not live. But if you have any more questions, put them in the description below, and I'll make sure I answer them. All right, I hope you have a wonderfully creative, happy new year. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you soon. Take care.